Good. Hello. Welcome back. Happy Monday to you. Look, I've had a haircut. All of the fluff is gone, apart from this fluff, obviously. Yeah. So, good to not see you because I can't see you, but good to speak to you if you're listening and when you listen. I hope you're well. I hope you're doing okay. Yeah. Been lots of negativity going around the air recently. This coronavirus is really starting to get to people. So obviously, unsurprisingly so. I hope you're well. I really do. You have my best wishes, and I hope that you're enjoying these and getting a little bit of fun, a little bit of joy from them. I'm certainly enjoying doing them, but there's no point in me doing it if you guys don't enjoy it. So I hope you are. Yeah. Right. Well, as you are probably aware, we're reading Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Part 6 is today. We're going to finish it at the end of this week, and then we're going to go to a different author. I've done Roald Dahl 3 times in a row now. So, if you may recall, they got into a big fight with the Vermicious Cnids. So we're going to carry on from there. What have we just missed? Oh yes, the Vermicious Cnids batting the transport capsule, which is taking the people away from the USA space station because they're in danger from these aliens. So let's carry on then. Chapter 11 of Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, written by Roald Dahl. The Battle of the Cnids. Grandpa Joe, sir, shouted Mr. Wonky. Mr. Wonky? Mr. Wonka. Good start. Am I right? Hello, Peter. Just going to wave at you. I'm going to start from the top. Grandpa Joe, sir, shouted Mr. Wonka. Kindly jerk yourself over to the far corner of the elevator there and turn that handle. It lowers the rope. A rope's no good, Mr. Wonka. They need to bite through a rope in a second. It's a steel rope, said Mr. Wonka. It's made of re-enscorched steel. If they try to bite through that, their teeth will splinter like spillikins. To your buttons, Charlie. You've got to help me maneuver. We're going right over the top of the transport capsule, and then we'll try to hook onto it somewhere and get a firm hold. Like a battleship going into action, the Great Glass Elevator, with boosting rockets firing, moved slowly over the top of the enormous transport capsule. The Cnids immediately stopped attacking the capsule, and they went for the elevator. Squadron after squadron of giant Vermicious Cnids flung themselves furiously against Mr. Wonka's marvellous flying machine. Wham! Crash! Bang! The noise was thunderous and terrible. The elevator was tossed about the sky like a leaf, and inside it, Grandma Josephine, Grandma Georgina, and Grandpa George, floating in their nightshirts, were all yowling and screeching and flapping their arms and calling for help. Mrs. Bucket had wrapped her arms around Mr. Bucket and was clasping so tightly that one of his shirt buttons punctured his skin. That's all they're doing in this whole story. They're holding on to each other. Oh, well, they could be worse. Charlie and Mr. Wonka, as cool as 2 cubes of ice, were up near the ceiling, working the booster rocket controls, and Grandpa Joe, shouting war cries and throwing curses at the Cnids, was down below, turning the handle that unwound the steel rope. At the same time, he was watching the rope through the glass floor of the elevator. Starboard a bit, Charlie, shouted Grandpa Joe. We're right on top of her now. Forward a couple of yards, Mr. Wonka. I'm trying to get the hook around the stumpy thing sticking out in front there. Hold it. I've got it. That's it. Now, forward a little now. Forward and see if it holds. More. The big steel rope tightened. It held. And now, wonder of wonders, with her booster rockets blazing, the elevator began to tow the huge transport capsule forward and away. Full speed ahead, shouted Grandpa Joe. She's going to hold. She's holding. She's holding fine. All boosters firing, cried Mr. Wonka, and the elevator leapt ahead. Still, the rope held. Mr. Wonka jetted himself down to Grandpa Joe and shook him warmly by the hand. Well done, sir, he said. You did a brilliant job under heavy fire. Charlie looked back at the transport capsule, some 30 yards behind them on the end of the tow line. It had little windows up front, and in the windows he could clearly see the flabbergasted faces of Shuckworth, Shanks, and Showler. Charlie waved at them and gave them the thumbs-up symbol. Symbol, same thing. They didn't wave back. They simply gaped. There's a lot of gaping in these stories. Hi, Chloe. You going to stick around? Chloe comes on. She says, hi, John, and she leaves. Each to their own, I suppose. Right, okay. They're gaping. They couldn't believe what was happening. Grandpa Joe blew himself upward and hovered beside Charlie, bubbling with excitement. Charlie, my boy, he said. We've been through a few funny things together lately, but never anything like this. Grandpa, where are the Canids? They've suddenly vanished. Everyone looked round. The only Canid in sight was their old friend with the purple behind, still cruising alongside in its usual place, still glaring into the elevator. Maybe today there's nothing better to do. Ha ha! Yeah! Or you're welcome to stick around. Just a minute! Cried Grandma Josephine. What's that I see over there? Again they looked, and this time, sure enough, away in the distance, in the deep blue sky of outer space, they saw a massive cloud of vermicious Canids wheeling and circling like a fleet of bombers. If you think we're out of the woods yet, you're crazy, shouted Grandma Georgina. I fear no Canids, said Mr. Wonka. We've got them beaten now. Poppy rot and pigwash, said Grandma Josephine. Any moment now they'll be at us again. Look at them. They're coming in. They're coming closer. This was true. The huge fleet of Canids had moved at an incredible speed. What? Oh no, they'd moved in at incredible speed and was now flying level with the great glass elevator, a couple of 100 yards away on the right-hand side. The one with the bump on its rear end was much closer, only 20 yards away on the same side. It's changing shape, cried Charlie. That nearest one. What's it going to do? Ah! It's getting longer and longer. And indeed it was. The mammoth egg-shaped body was slowly stretching itself out like chewing gum, becoming longer and longer and thinner, until, in the end, it looked exactly like a long, slimy green serpent. As thick as a tree. A thick tree. And as long as a football pitch. At the front end were the eyes, big and white, with the red centres. At the back, a kind of tapering tail, and the very end of the tail was the enormous round swollen bump it had got when it crashed against the glass. Poor thing. Wait, why am I feeling sorry for it? Anyway, the people floating inside the elevator watched and waited. And they saw the long, rope-like Canid turning and coming straight, but quite slowly, towards the great glass elevator. Oh boy. Now it began actually wrapping its ropey body around the elevator itself. Once around, it went, then twice around, and very horrifyingly, it was to be inside and to... I can't read today. And very horrifying it was to be inside and to see the soft green body squishing up against the glass, no more than a few inches away. It's tying us up like a parcel, yelled Grandma Josephine. Bunkum, said Mr. Wonka. It's going to crush us into coils, wailed Grandma Georgina. Never, said Mr. Wonka. Charlie glanced quickly back at the transport capsule. The sheet-white faces of Shuckworth, Shanks and Showler were pressed against the glass of the little windows, terror-struck, stupefied, stunned, their mouths open all the while. Their expressions frozen like fish fingers. Okay. Once again, Charlie gave them the thumbs-up signal. Showler acknowledged it with a sickly grin, but that was all. Oh, screamed Grandma Josephine. Get that beastly, squishy thing away from here! Having curled its body twice around the elevator, the Canid now proceeded to tie a knot with its two ends. I really can't read today. I'm very apologising. And I can't speak English either. Bear with me, okay? It's a Monday. It's proceeded to tie a knot with its two ends. A good strong knot. Oh yes, okay. Left over right, then right over left. Right, so it's gone round and it's tied itself into a knot. Yeah. When it had pulled the knot tight, there remained about 5 yards of one end hanging loose. This was the end with the eyes on it. But it didn't hang loose for long. It quickly curled itself into the shape of a huge hook, and the hook stuck straight out sideways from the elevator as though waiting for something else to hook onto it. Okay. While I haven't read this in years, by the way, so I don't actually know what's going to happen next. While all of this was going on, nobody had noticed what the other Knids were up to. Mr. Wonka! Charlie cried. Look at the others! What are they doing? What indeed? These, too, had all changed shape and had become longer, but not nearly so long or as thin as the first one. Each of them had turned itself into a kind of thick rod, and the rod was curled around at both ends, at the tail end and at the head end, so that it made a double-ended hook. Just kind of like... And now all the hooks were linking up into a long chain, 1,000 Knids, all joining together and curving around in the sky to make a chain of Knids half a mile long or more. And the Knid at the very front of the chain, whose front hook was not, of course, hooked up to anything, was leading them in a wide circle and sweeping in towards the great glass elevator. I'm looking at a picture. I might show you. Yes. So there he is, look. Big Knid, transport capsule, and all the rest of them. Oh boy. Hey! Shouted Grandpa Joe. Oh, they're going to hook up with this brute who's tied himself around us and tow us away, cried Charlie. To the planet Vermes, gasped Grandma Josephine. 80,427 million miles from here. They can't do that, cried Mr. Wonka. We're doing the towing around here. They're going to link up, Mr. Wonka, Charlie said. They really are. Can't we stop them? Oh, they're going to tow us away, and they're going to tow the people we're towing away as well. Do something, you old fool, shrieked Grandma Georgina. Don't just float about looking at them. I must admit, said Mr. Wonka, that for the first time in my life, I find myself at a bit of a loss. They all stared in horror through the glass at the long chain of vermicious Knids. I would have said at Mr. Wonka. Wow! The leader of the chain was coming closer and closer. The hook, with its two big angry eyes on it, was out and ready. In 30 seconds, it would link up with a hook on the Knid wrapped around the elevator. I want to go home, wailed Grandma Josephine. Why can't we all go home? Great thundering tomcats, cried Mr. Wonka. Home is right! What on earth am I thinking of? Come on, Charlie, quick! Re-entry! You take the yellow button. Press it for all you're worth. I'll handle this lot. Charlie and Mr. Wonka literally flew to the buttons. Hold your hats, shouted Mr. Wonka. Grab your gizzards. We're going down. Rockets started firing out of the elevator from all sides. It tilted and gave a sickening lurch and then plunged downwards into the Earth's atmosphere at a simply colossal speed. Retro rockets! Bellowed Mr. Wonka. I mustn't forget to fire the retro rockets. He flew over to another series of buttons and started playing on them like a piano. The elevator was now streaking downward, heading head first, upside down, and all the people found themselves floating upside down as well. Help! Screamed Grandma Georgina. All the blood's going to my head! Then turn yourself the right way up, said Mr. Wonka. That's easy enough, isn't it? Everyone blew and puffed and turned somersaults in the air until at last they were all the right way up. How's the tow rope holding, Grandpa? Mr. Wonka called out. They're still with us, Mr. Wonka. The rope's holding fine. It was an amazing sight. The great glass elevator streaking down towards the Earth with the huge transport capsule in tow behind it. But the long chain of Knids was coming after them, following them down, keeping pace with them easily, and now the hook of the leading Knid in the chain was actually reaching out and grasping for the hook made by the Knid on the elevator. We're too late! Screamed Grandma Georgina. They're going to link up and haul us back! I think not, said Mr. Wonka. Don't you remember what happens to a Knid when it enters the Earth's atmosphere at high speed? He gets red hot. He burns away in a long fiery trail. He becomes a shooting Knid. Soon these dirty beasts will start popping like popcorn. As they streaked on downwards, sparks began to fly off the sides of the elevator. The glass glowed pink, then red, then scarlet. Sparks also began to fly on the long chain of Knids, and the leading Knid in the chain started to shine like a red-hot poker. So did all the others. So did the great slimy brute coiled around the elevator itself. This one, in fact, was trying frantically to uncoil itself and get away, but it was having trouble untying the knot, and in another 10 seconds it began to sizzle. Inside the elevator, they could actually hear it sizzling. Ooh, sausages. It made a noise like bacon frying. Oh, don't talk about food. And exactly the same sort of thing was happening to the other 1,000 canids in the chain. The tremendous heat was simply sizzling them. They were red hot, every one of them. Then suddenly they became white hot, and they gave out a dazzling white light. "They're shooting canids!" cried Charlie. "What a splendid sight!" said Mr. Wonka. "It's better than fireworks!" In a few seconds more, the canids had blown away in a cloud of ashes, and it was all over. "Oh, we've done it!" cried Mr. Wonka. "They've been roasted to a crisp. They've been frizzled to a fritter. We're saved!" "What do you mean, saved?" said Grandma Josephine. "We'll all be frizzled ourselves if this goes on any longer. We'll be barbecued like beefsteaks. Look at the glass. It's hotter than a fizzgig." "Have no fears, dear lady," answered Mr. Wonka. "My elevator is air-conditioned, ventilated, aerated, and automated in every possible way. We're going to be all right now." "How can you not like bacon?" No. Bacon is amazing. Unless you're a vegetarian, then it's not. Who's talking? All right. This is the first time she's spoken in pages. "I haven't the faintest idea what's going on," said Mrs. Bucket, making one of her rare speeches. "But whatever it is, I don't like it." "Aren't you enjoying it, Mother?" Charlie asked her. "No," she said. "I am not, nor is your father." "What a great sight it is," said Mr. Wonka. "Just look at the big Earth down there, Charlie. Getting bigger and bigger." "Ooh. And us going to meet it at 2,000 miles an hour." Wait, so that's Grandma Georgina. "And us going to meet it at 2,000 miles an hour," groaned Grandma Georgina. "How are you going to slow down, for heaven's sake? You didn't think of that, did you? Did you?" "He's got parachutes," Charlie told her. "I'll bet he's got great big parachutes that just open up before we hit." "Parachutes?" said Mr. Wonka with contempt. "Parachutes are only for astronauts and sissies. And anyway, we don't want to slow down. We want to speed up. Mwaha! I told you already, we've got to be going at an absolutely tremendous speed when we hit. Otherwise, we'll never punch our way through the roof of the chocolate factory." "How about the transport capsule?" Charlie asked anxiously. "Oh, we'll be letting them go in a few seconds now," Mr. Wonka answered. "They do have parachutes. 3 of them, to slow you down on the last bit." "Oh, well, how do you know we won't land in the Pacific Ocean?" said Grandma Josephine. "I don't," said Mr. Wonka. "But we all know how to swim, do we not?" "This man," shouted Grandma Josephine, "is crazy as a crumpet." "It's cracked as a crayfish," cried Grandma Georgina. Down and down plunged the great glass elevator. Nearer and nearer came the earth below. Oceans and continents rushed up to meet them, getting bigger every second. "Why are you guys talking about meat? Yeesh. Anyway. Grandpa Joe, sir, throw out the rope. Let it go," ordered Mr. Wonka. "They'll be all right now, so long as their parachutes are working." "Rope gone," called out Grandpa Joe, and the huge transport capsule, on its own now, began to swing away to one side. Charlie waved to the 3 astronauts in the front window. None of them waved back. They were still sitting there in a kind of shocked daze, gaping at the old ladies and the old men and the small boy floating about in the glass elevator. "It won't be long now," said Mr. Wonka, reaching for a row of tiny pale buttons in one corner. "We shall soon know whether we are alive or dead. Keep very quiet, please, for this final bit. I have to concentrate awfully hard, otherwise we'll come down in the wrong place." They plunged into a thick black bank of cloud, and for 10 seconds they could see nothing. When they came out of the cloud, the transport capsule had disappeared, and the earth was very close. And there was only a great spread of land between them, with mountains and forests, then fields and trees, and a small town. "There it is!" shouted Mr. Wonka. "My chocolate factory! My beloved chocolate factory!" "You mean Charlie's chocolate factory?" said Grandpa Joe. "That's right," said Mr. Wonka, addressing Charlie. "I'd clean forgotten. I do apologize to you, my dear boy. Of course, it's yours. And here we go." Through the glass floor of the elevator, Charlie caught a quick glimpse of the huge red roof and the tall chimneys of the giant factory. They were plunging straight down onto it. "Hold your breath," shouted Mr. Wonka. "Hold your nose, fasten your seatbelts, and say your prayers. We're going through the roof." That was a long chapter. Goodness me, that was like 20 minutes long. Hang on. Okay, the next one's really short. I need to do 2 a day, otherwise I don't do the 20 in the 2 weeks. You see? Hey. Chapter 12. Back to the chocolate factory. Crash. Or rather, crash! It's the wrong way round. Crash! Crash. Yeah. And then the noise of splintering wood and broken glass and absolute darkness and the most awful crunching sounds as the elevator rushed on, smashing everything before it. All at once the crashing noises stopped, and the ride became smoother, and the elevator seemed to be travelling on guide rails, twisting and turning like a roller coaster. Whew! You guys are still talking about sausages? Nice, okay. That's cool. And when the lights came on, Charlie suddenly realised that for the last few seconds he hadn't been floating at all. He'd been standing normally on the floor. Mr. Wonka was on the floor too, and so was Grandpa Joe, and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket, and also the big bed. As for Grandma Josephine, Grandma Georgina, and Grandpa George, who hasn't said anything for ages, by the way, they must have fallen right back onto the bed because they were now all three on top of it and scrabbling to get under the blanket. "We're through!" yelled Mr. Wonka. "We've done it! We're in!" Grandpa Joe grabbed him by the hand and said, "Well done, sir. How splendid! What a magnificent job!" Where in the world are we now?" said Mrs. Bucket. "We're back, Mother," cried Charlie. We're in the chocolate factory." "I'm very glad to hear it," said Mrs. Bucket. "But didn't we come rather a long way round?" "We had to," said Mr. Wonka, "to avoid the traffic." "I have never met a man," said Grandma Georgina, "who talks so much absolute nonsense." "A little nonsense now and then is relished by the wisest men," said Mr. Wonka. "Why don't you pay some attention to where this crazy elevator's going?" shouted Grandma Josephine, "and stop foodling about. A little foodling roundabout, will stop you going up the spout," said Mr. Wonka. "What did I tell you?" cried Grandma Georgina. "It's round the twist. He's bogged as a beetle. He's dotty as a dingback. He's got rats in the roof. I want to go home. Home. Yeah." "Too late," said Mr. Wonka. "We're there." The elevator stopped. The doors opened and Charlie found himself looking out once again at the great chocolate room with the chocolate river and the chocolate waterfall, where, if you haven't listened to Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, I advise you to stop now and go back in time, right? Cool, we're with you. The chocolate waterfall where everything was eatable, the trees, the leaves, the grass, the pebbles, and even the rocks. And there to meet them were hundreds and hundreds of tiny Oompa Loompas, all waving and cheering. Whee-woo! It was a sight that took one's breath away. Even Grandma Georgina was stunned into silence for a few seconds, but not for long. "Who in the world are all these little men?" she said. "They're Oompa Loompas," Charlie told her. "They're wonderful. You'll love them." "Shh," said Grandpa Joe. "Listen, Charlie. The drums are starting up. They're going to sing. Here they are." "Hallelujah," sang the Oompa Loompas. "Oh, hallelujah and hooray! Our Willy Wonka's back today. We thought you'd never make it home. We thought you'd left us all alone. We knew that you would have to face some frightful creatures up in space. We even thought we heard you crunch. Hearty crunch or something eating you for lunch. Man, that voice is difficult. I'm not going to continue doing it." "Mm-hmm. All right, shouted Mr. Wonka, laughing and raising both hands. "Thank you for your welcome. Will some of you please help get this bed out of here?" 50 Oompa Loompas ran forward and pushed the bed with the 3 old ones in it out of the elevator. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket, both looking completely overwhelmed by it all, followed the bed out. Then came Grandpa Joe, Charlie, and Mr. Wonka. "Now," said Mr. Wonka, addressing Grandpa George, Grandma Georgina, and Grandma Josephine, "up you hop out of that bed and let's get cracking. I'm sure you'll all want to lend a hand running the factory." "Who? Us?" said Grandma Josephine. "Yes, you," said Mr. Wonka. "You must be joking," said Grandma Georgina. "I never joke," said Mr. Wonka. "Hang on." "Now, you listen to me, sir," said old Grandpa George, sitting up in bed. He's got his voice back. "You've got us into quite enough troubles and tumbles for one day." "I've got you out of them too," said Mr. Wonka proudly. "And I'm going to get you out of that bed as well. You see if I don't." "Eh!" that's all for today. Good grief. Oh, that was long. Okay, I'll better skedaddle. But I'll see you guys tomorrow at 5:30 to find out what happens to the old people in the bed. So we come out of space and we're now back down in the chocolate factory. That's right. I don't even know what accent I'm doing. I think it's... Never mind. Cool. See you tomorrow at 5:30. I hope you enjoyed yourselves and continue enjoying yourselves into the future.